Like any course, this course comes with a bit of the instructor's own perspective in it, and I just want to make sure you understand at the outset the perspective that I'm taking on the work we're doing in the course. I happen to think it's the right perspective, otherwise I wouldn't be taking it, but I think you should have the ability to make up your mind on that. The first thing is that we'll be taking a professional kind of perspective on this. That is, I expect you to be working in professional environments. There's nothing wrong with amateur development for the web. In fact, one of the great things about the web is that amateurs can create really amazing stuff for the web, but our focus here really is on doing it at the professional grade. And what that means for me is that you need to know how to code by hand. This, for me, is essential, and the essential difference between many professional and non-professional coders for the web. Now, that means that we won't be using tools like Dreamweaver, which is a what you see is what you get kind of operator. It's like using a word processor. We're going to be using Notepad or replacements for Notepad. There's nothing particularly wrong with Dreamweaver. I know many professionals who do use Dreamweaver. However, especially for someone starting out, it's a good way to get into some very bad habits. So I'd prefer you not use Dreamweaver, even in code view, for this course. I won't know unless you end up producing really bad markup, which sometimes Dreamweaver still does. If I see bad markup, you're going to get graded on what your IDE, your interactive development environment, has done for you. So I would suggest you stick with Notepad, so I'm grading you and not Dreamweaver. Once you're done with the course, if you want to develop in Dreamweaver having understood the code, then go for it. I know many colleagues who prefer to use Dreamweaver as they're developing a website. Many more who don't, but there are some who choose to use the code view in Dreamweaver, particularly if they're working in an environment with other people in the organization who are accustomed to that particular kind of workflow. The other perspective which goes with this is this idea of the open web. That means that the technologies we'll be using will be largely open source and freely available. So, for example, we won't be using Microsoft servers. We won't be using tools that you have to pay for the most part. So most of them will be free, as in beer, as well as free as in speech. That is, these are technologies that anyone can pick up and use and distribute. And there are lots of good reasons that we will talk about as this course goes on to use open, standards-based kinds of development. That means, for example, we won't be using Flash because it's not an open, standards-based development platform. And if you have an iPad, you aren't using Flash anyway. So we'll be focusing on those technologies that are in that direction. I have mentioned that these are also usually cost-free. That is, you usually don't have to pay for them. There is one thing that you should expect to pay for through the semester, which is you're going to need to figure out how to get hosting. And we can talk about, or on the list, some ways that you might collaborate with each other and have shared hosting so you can each use it. Finally, one of the things we're going to talk about is this idea of loose coupling. There's lots of software patterns, that is, ways that people have learned are better for making software, including web applications and websites. And one of those is to be able to couple things loosely. That is, to make sure that your content is separated from your style, from the way the content looks, and that's separated from the way that it works. And so we'll be talking about, for example, the importance of making sure that your websites work no matter who's viewing it on no matter what kind of machine. We'll talk a little bit about how we want to make sure that HTML is just for content and CSS is just for the presentation of that content. And we'll be using external CSS and external style sheets and external JavaScript, and making sure that the sites work without JavaScript. If all of that sounds very confusing, don't worry about it too much right now. But one of the principles that we'll be working on that is a perspective, but one that's widely professionally shared, is this idea of loose coupling throughout the semester. So there are some of the things that I'll be keeping in the back of my head, and you'll see through in the structure of the course as well.